Hey guys, Loman02, currently getting ready to replay a recorded match with Twiddle Vaults, which is a combo control, well, more of a combo deck, but actually combo control. I'll call it combo control. So, we're playing against Cousin Ted here, so this hand's interesting. I do keep it because it has all of its mana, including a strip mine, so if we get turn 1 Library of Alexandria, which people are known to keep sketchier hands with Library, just banking on it to do something, but in a 4 of, possibly 4 of, strip mine world, generally not as much, but we're pretty happy to have mine. So what's this hand do? This hand has Red Elemental Blast, which can stop, something. If we draw to a transmute, we can transmute the Mana Vault into a Time Vault, which is kind of how the combo works. So essentially we get a bunch of Howling Mines down, and then utilize Transmute to find the Time Vault, and then twiddle a couple times and draw 12 to 15, 18 cards, and generally find a win from there. So this is a Channel Fireball deck as well, so we do have the Channel, which isn't per se great, but it is a combo piece, and I don't know what he's on, but when I see Loa, I'm pretty happy to have Channel in my hand. Draw to a Tropical Island. I just play the Mine and get rid of the Library because I don't want to let my opponent get ahead on cards. His hand's not extremely explosive. We go ahead and just play out the Trop. Opponent, I believe, plays a Mine of their own and mines instantly. So this is one thing that I don't think bears extreme relevance to this game, but I do think is important. So, I think you have to be discerning with your strip mines. I strip mine there to avoid a disaster situation where my opponent gets ahead on cards, which I think is perfectly, relevant. I think you must do that almost if you want to win the game. But when you just mine in the dark on a random land like a tropical island, you may get lucky. It's kind of a shot in the dark, and you may just mana screw me, or it may do absolutely nothing and put you back a land drop after already having been mined yourself. So I play out the City of Brass here so I can leave up Twiddle and or the Red Elemental Blast. Opponent has an additional land here and plays out their Fellwar Stone. I go ahead and resolve the Sylvan Library so I can continue to make land drops. My opponent strip mines again, very aggressively mining, so they get rid of my Sylvan Library with a Disenchant, and I drop another land that I find off the top. At this point, I believe my opponent stops playing lands. They copy Artifact and make a Fellwar Stone, but they're out of lands. They're down to 3 cards. So they've expended their cards trying to exhaust my resources, but not really functionally getting themselves ahead on the board, with the exception of 2 additional mana in the form of cards, Fellwar Stone. We go ahead for a Brain Geyser here, and I Red Elemental Blast them. So I guess what I wanted to get after, and it's going to be more relevant when we get to Game 3, is that, Strip Mine is a tool. It's land destruction, sure, but what are you trying to do with it? Are you trying to accrue tempo? Typically, Strip Mine is going to be the best in a deck that can go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, right? Because then you just Strip Mine them, they're behind a turn, and you just continue to hit them with, weenie creatures, or whatever. So, I guess what I mean to say is, when you use Strip Mine, yes, you're destroying a land, can't forget that, but what are you trying to do with it? Are you buying cards, like I did against Library of Alexandria? Essentially virtual cards that I'm not going to have, my opponent will not have either. Or are you trying to buy tempo? Because right here, my opponent's functionally doing nothing but strip mining me, regardless. And what I would say is, if they don't have counter magic or, something else in hand, which seems unlikely, then I suppose you could do that just to buy times. It's essentially like a very inefficient Tangle Wire. But at the same time, I don't think it's always right because you limit options. Now, if they had 2 additional strip mines and I did not have counter magic, that'd be 2 additional cards off of a Brain Geyser here. So I think you need to consider that when you're utilizing mine in this format. Don't look at it just as LD, but what is the purpose behind the LD? Is it tempo? Is it to prevent card draw off of library? Does it take them off a relevant color for cards you assume or know they have in hand? So I think at that point it does become card advantage again. So when I say card advantage off mine, what I mean is let's say they don't have a Black Lotus in play, and I know they have Disenchant. Let's say they don't have any of the artifact mana. Let's say I know they have Disenchant, but I want to resolve my Time Vault. If I strip mine the Tundra, at that point in time I've essentially gained card advantage because they have 1 additional dead card in hand. Now, the converse use of it to buy tempo would be where, I play out, a turn 1 Icacian Javelineers, turn 2 White Knight, strip mine, turn 3, and play an Order of Leper. That would be for tempo, for me to win, to positively enact my game plan, as opposed to buying cards, essentially, virtual cards, that I'll never see, but my opponent will not get to use on my relevant cards. So that's kind of how I kind of wanted to get into that because I think it makes a lot more sense when you look at Game 3 and kind of how that plays out. So opponent goes for a James Day Tome here. I'm very happy with this. They Tormod's Crypt in response to, they Tormod's Crypt and then Twister me. I go ahead and cast an Ancestral Recall on their end step, hoping that they'll counter it. I get them completely tapped out here, and as you can see, my hand's pretty gassed up. So I go ahead and just start playing nonsense out. Play out a Soul Ring, the Vault, Twiddle the Vault, take an additional turn after this. I go ahead and tap the Mana Vault, sack it, and convert it into a Howling Mine, and play out another Foul War Stone off the additional floating mana from the Mana Vault. At this point in time, I hit a Wheel of Fortune and a Brain Geyser. Kind of sad to see the Geyser go, but I'm going to try to find more pieces of my combo to continue to take turns here. I don't find an actual Twiddle, but I do find another Transmute and a Time Walk, which allows me to get an additional Howling Mine down and take a Time Walk turn. I also go ahead and just Hercules Recall them to put them back on tempo, and additionally, if I hit Mind Twist, which I do, or another Draw 7, I can just, completely obliterate their hand. Play on a Vault here. Go ahead and twist their whole hand of 11 down to 0, which is a pretty sizable beating here. Go ahead and Twiddle the Vault, take an additional turn, go into my next turn and draw 4. And what we're looking for at this point is just a Fireball. So we find the DT, and I believe I just DT for the Recall here and get 2 Twiddles back so I can take 2 additional turns. So we get Recall, ditch the 2 Power Sinks, and essentially put 2 turns in the bank, which is essentially like drawing 8 additional cards here, which is pretty sure to win me the game. At this point, I'm like probably 95% to win. I go ahead and untap the Mana Vault, because I don't think mana is going to be a constraint at this point. I draw another Twiddle. Go ahead. I'm already floating a turn at this point. Now I'm floating 2 additional turns. I'm not going to use the Regrowth yet. There's nothing that I really need in there yet. Find the Mirror Universe. At this point, I am going to go ahead and utilize the Regrowth to find the Demonic Tutor after casting the Mirror Universe. So we get the Mirror Universe down, say, hey, cool. Oh, I'm sorry, we're still floating a turn. So we go ahead and change life totals, Regrowth the DT if we're not going to draw the Fireball here, use the DT to find the Fireball, and then go for the win. But the opponent concedes at this point. They're on 0 cards, they're completely tapped out with 3 lands, and, we basically played our whole deck. So this is kind of the textbook answer for how Twiddle Vault should work. We ran the gambit of getting the Ancestral countered on their end step, essentially using it as a mana short. And from there, it was pretty elementary to just run through the entire deck and get to a point where we found the Fireball, despite having only 7 cards left, and we have a very lethal Fireball against 12 life. Game 2, things do not go quite according to our plan. So, opener's bad. We go ahead and keep this 6er on the draw. I put the balance on the bottom here. And my thinking is, hey, this has a Transmute to find mana. It has a Fel War Stone. We know they're playing blue, so if I hit a land, I can play the Fel War Stone and transmute it into something. Unfortunately, they, turn 2 mine again. They're very heavy-handed with their mines. I'm not saying that was wrong, but you don't know. You don't know you're going to mana screw me there. But unfortunately, we just continue to miss and just get beat down by these factories. Finally draw into a land, go ahead and resolve the Mana Vault, tap it for the Fel War Stone, and then use the Fel War Stone to play out the Time Vault. It gets disenchanted, and opponent on the following turn, I believe, has City in a Bottle to destroy our only land, and then has a Tormod's Crypt, which essentially says, hey, your Time Vault's gone, which from this position, I'm not going to win. I'm already at 12 life. I have a Tap Vault doing 1 to me, so I'm quite dead, and I have to concede it here. So, possibly should have gone to 5, but this is a combo deck, and it does want a lot of its components, and I think that hand had some promise to it if it hit 1 additional land a little bit earlier than it did. So, Game 3. Now, this is the good game. This game was actually very challenging and fun to play. It had a lot of cool interplay in it, and was very fun. If Moto will allow me to open it. Alright, here we go. Moto may be a little slow for this one. This game was pretty robust. So, good opening hand. We have an Ancestral Recall and a Time Walk, so 2 pieces, or 2 restricted cards in the format, which is pretty strong. We're going to go ahead and Ancestral on their upkeep. Whenever you have Ancestral in your opener before your opponent can play anything, it feels pretty unfair because there's no mental misstep or any of that nonsense. So opponent busts out a Strip Mine and then instantly plays on a Black Lotus and Tormod's Crypt. Which belies that possibly they have counter magic, but I don't really care for this line of play. And they seem to do it every single time. Strip Mine turn 1, just automatically. And I think a lot of players probably do that. And I'm not saying it's per se wrong, but like I was saying in the first game, I think it pays to be a little more discerning with it. I play out my Volk because it allows me to leave up my Red Elemental Blast. Again, my opponent's really doing nothing, so I guess they're trying to use their Strip Mines as essentially a Tangle Wire effect to give them additional draws if they can't play relevant spells themselves. So I go ahead and play out the Mox Jet. My game plan here is to play out the Felwar Stone and then pass it. I don't want a Time Walk here. I want a Time Walk once I have the Howling Mine online. So go ahead and pass it back, because my opponent's doing nothing, really. They play on a Vault off of a Mishra's Factory, cast down a Suchi, which is fine by me. I draw into a Demonic Tutor, so I go ahead and play out the Howling Mine, play out the Time Walk. They counterspell the Time Walk. I go ahead and Red Elemental Blast him here, so I can take this turn. Draw another Mine, as well as the Balance. So I go ahead and DT here. I DT for the Vault, play out the Vault, untap the Vault, take an additional turn. Maybe I want to be a little more patient here and just get the Howling Mine down, but I feel like my opponent, is kind of mana screwed themselves at this point, or they've kind of put themselves in a place where they're mana screwed. I go ahead and transmute and kind of hope here. I'm playing the hope game that my opponent doesn't hit a disenchant on their next turn, even though they're going to see a lot of cards. If they don't, I probably win the game 95% of the time, drawing 4 additional cards. Unfortunately, I miss pretty heavily here, and they found a Tormod. They still have their Tormod's Crypt, so I can't get the Vault back. They go ahead and, I believe, disenchant my Vault. I still get the Time Walk turn, so I get to draw some additional cards here, which is not irrelevant. And I just go ahead and start playing out all of my nonsense and leave up Power Sink. So I've lost the Vault at this point. I basically have to utilize Mirror, Channel, plus Fireball to win this game. My opponent plays City in a Bottle out. I go ahead and try to counter this just to see if I can get another counter out of them, because they're obviously representing it right here. And I would prefer to get it out of them here, as opposed to losing my land, because it does kill essentially 4 cards in my deck. Kills the 4 Cities of Brass plus the Library of Alexandria. They play out a Disrupting Scepter, which I don't think is bound to be very good, because I'm going to have irrelevant cards that I do not want. I just start playing out my nonsense here. Go ahead and Time Twister. They go ahead and use their Crypt finally. And I draw into a bunch of nonsense. Obviously, Library of Alexandria is not doing much here. I just play out all of my crap, and then leave up the Mana Drain. One of the other things is, I think my opponent allows the Howling Mines to go on for quite a long time. Disenchant's very important in this matchup, and not always per se for the Time Vault, because this deck can just straight up win off Howling Mine as well, which it is what it does this game. So I continue to play my Colored Sources out. I don't want to play my Strip Mine yet. Mine's a grid card, but I'm not really looking to use mine until I can color screw my opponent on blue mana on their turn, on their end step, after they do something big, like play a Jame Day Tome or something, and then win on my turn. They go ahead and cast a Divine Offering here. I just go ahead and counter this, or I attempt to counter it, and it works. They Demonic Tutor, I believe, finding another Artifact Destruction spell. Oh, wait, no, they recalled for something. Oh, recalled for Divine Offering, okay, and they don't want to pop their Lotus for it. So we start taking damage off this. Find the Mind Twist, which is great. Also find Disenchant, which is also not a bad pickup, because it allows me to blow up the Lotus and go to my second main if they opt to try to counterspell my Mind Twist here. So I go ahead and twist them for their entire hand and leave up a Red Elemental Blast. As you'll note, my opponent, is having to keep like 6 and 7 or even 8 discard at the end of their turn cards in their hand, whereas my deck's capable of functioning very well under Howling Mine. So I think the mines are extremely relevant here, and I think if you look at his mana base, that's also a not near relevant component to this game. Finally gets rid of the vaults, or not the vaults, the Howling Mines, and I'm forced to say, okay, and they have Tormod's Crypt, so I only have one vault or Howling Mine left in my deck, but I do have the Transmute here. So I'm not going to play City of Brass out. That's pitch fodder for the Disrupting Scepter. I do play out the other Howling Mine. I twiddle my own mine so they don't get to draw the additional card, so they're only drawing one card next turn. So they pretty much have to draw well here. They go ahead and Disrupting Scepter me. I discard the City of Brass, which is irrelevant because I can't play it into City in a Bottle, and they finally start attacking with their Mishra's Factory. I draw to my Fireball plus my Recall. With them on one card, I don't feel like there's a way they can stop this outside of, well, not even Beb would do it. So I go ahead and Fireball them for 16 life points and leave up Red Elemental Blast to stop any counter magic if they have drawn into it. And that is the game. 15, I'm sorry. So this game was actually extremely interesting. The presence of Tormod's Crypt obviously becomes problematic. This is a Time Twister regrowth deck with Recall if, for something happens. So Tormod's Crypt, positionally used against, Twisters and regrowths can force the deck to lose some pretty vital components, which in this case, happened to be the Time Vault. So as opposed to, going off on that turn where our opponent had Disenchant, or after that turn our opponent had Disenchant, Ancestral Recall into Disenchant, we had to play a very long game, which obviously assumes a ton more risk because my opponent got to see a lot more cards. However, due to some of the inefficiencies of their cards and also the colored casting requirements of their cards, it was very difficult for them to both react to me and also to be aggressive because my deck is eventually, under a setup of drawing, 3 to 4 cards a turn, going to be able to beat their deck. Not that it has more mana, or not that it has more counter magic, but it has more mana available to it, and its spells generally have X in them. So we play a lot of power sync stuff like that. So I can essentially use 1 mana and then use a bunch of mana vaults, so there's 4 in this deck, to power them up. Whereas, their 1 counter spell is automatically going to take 2 lands. Most of my counter magic and my win cons only utilize 1 actual land mana source, or they only require 1 actual land mana source, and the rest can be colorless, which makes them beneficial in a situation where, their color requirements are a lot more heavy than mine are. Ties back into, their use of Strip Mine. So, I think, if they had saved some of their mines, you'll note right here, they attacked me with the Mishra's Factory, but I didn't even use my Strip Mine. I think my Strip Mine is more relevant to take them off of colored mana, just for the straight-up mana efficiency, than it is to take away their threat, because their threat's just not fast. My Fireball kill in 1 turn. It'll take their threat, 6 or 7, turns to kill me from 14, or 13 or 14. That all said, you start looking at the use of mine, and if one of those mines had been in play, yeah, I'd have an additional land, but they would have a committed colorless resource that can allow the Mishra's Factory to turn sideways while still having multiple additional colored sources that they can leave up. So, you look at this game, and they've strip mined, I believe, two or 3 times in this game, and if they had maybe not done it once, they had an additional source, and they probably got in for 4 to 5 more attacks, making the game a lot closer. So I think the game was fairly interesting. And yes, of course, we got a little lucky, but I think we played to our out, despite losing the critical components of our combo, which was essentially, putting them into a situation where, they could not counter my Fireball. And on this many cards, I think it was pretty viable. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video of Twiddle Vault. This deck's actually very interesting, and I actually had a lot of fun in this 3rd game because I think it's somewhat challenging to play around a deck that runs a main deck Tormod's Crypt, especially, when you're trying to utilize Time Twister and, Wheel of Fortune positionally, and possibly losing, not only restricted cards, but critical components to a combo. So, you get a little of everything in this. You get to see us get mana screwed 1 time. You get to see a textbook play out of Twiddle Vault in that game 1. And then you get to see the plan when things go wrong, which is always the games I enjoy, because when early tragedy strikes in a game, based on your initial going in plan, it tends to make for the best games because you have to figure out a line to get to victory, which I don't think was per se intuitive. It obviously circulated around Fireball, but it was very relevant on a lot of hidden information that they could possibly have, and then also on my ability to draw into some relevant stuff. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this game and short, I guess clinic on this matchup, Twiddle Vault, and then just, tempo and then mana efficiency in general. When I say mana efficiency, I guess I probably don't mean that. Well, maybe I do. When I say it, a lot of folks think like, oh, like Goblin Guy, that's mana efficient. No, what I really mean is utilizing or having the ability to utilize your mana each turn to enact your primary game plan. And or react to bridge into your primary game plan. That's where our opponent got foiled in this game, because they were unable, in my opinion, to adequately react to bridge into their primary game plan due to their lack of overall mana for the color requirements they have on cards like Counterspell, Mana Drain, etc. Dust to Dust, so like 2 white, 2 blue, like that right there is at least 4 lands that need to be tapped outside of like having a Mox Sapphire or a Mox Pearl. When you don't have those, like you're tapping 4 lands, and like I said, I mean like your land efficiency, I guess is what it would be. It's not mana efficiency, it's land efficiency. Is kind of I guess where I'm going with it. So hopefully that theoretical piece or like my ideas on how this game played out and just game theory in Magic the Gathering in general is not too far flung for you to kind of get and maybe understand, maybe disagree with, but it's just kind of how I've come to see the game. And I think a lot of players don't tend to think about it as much, and I think it does over time add up to some game losses if you don't consider that interplay between the colored resource requirements on each independent card that you put into your deck, and especially when they're reactive, how they enable you to bridge and transition to a position of inevitability, which my opponent was really never able to do this game, even though I see them as being the control deck in this matchup. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there. I hope you guys enjoy, and take care now.